I was coloring on the floor of my parents' house, coloring this picture of Cinderella with my 4-year-old gorgeous Portuguese and Filipina niece. And she was looking throughout the colored pencils to pick the blue for her dress, Cinderella's dress, and the yellow for Cinderella's hair, I said, Ren, why don't you pick the brown for her eyes and the black for her hair, just like you? And Tanya, in that moment, my perfect, intelligible 4-year-old beautiful niece doesn't skip a beat. She doesn't pause. She simply says, princesses don't look like me.
Mm-hmm.
And that story continues to break my heart because it's the story that I've lived my whole life of you cannot be what you cannot see.
Three, two, one. Welcome to the Campfire Circle. I'm your host, Tanya Bhattacharya, and I empower purpose-driven women in building influential personal brands that drive change and raise revenue. We all talk about getting a seat at the table, but why though? Who wants to sit in a stuffy boardroom anyway? Let's reimagine the ultimate space of leadership as a campfire circle, where we share stories that inspire movements, build brave communities to huddle together with for warmth, and where there is always room. Come sit with us. Okay, I'm here with Ché Elizaga Castro, who is a 5'2" Asian American brand storyteller based in Southern California, who is fueled by lifting the voices of diverse change makers. And she believes that your brand story is your number one tool to rally people around your big vision and create the impact that you and you alone can make. And you know what's so cool about that, Ché? Me too. Me too. Samesies. And I wanted to actually settle into that because as marketers and branding people, I feel like we're so trained to figure out how we're different, how we're unique, how we're individualized. And I get that. And it can be so healing and powerful to talk about how we're actually the same or rather interdependent, right?
Yeah.
So anytime I get to spend with you is a joy. It's a treat. I can't wait to dig in and see where this goes. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya. First of all, listeners, can we just enjoy how liquid gold Tanya's voice is? And secondly, I'm still laughing behind the mic that she called out my 5'2"ness. Okay, you know, shorties, we're here to party. That's here for y'all.
That's it. We're fun sized.
Fun sized, yes.
Oh, I love it. Okay, so my friend, let's start in the beginning. Okay. So I know you are so good at crafting and birthing other women's brand stories, but I want to talk about yours. Okay. So what did you grow through to become the guide that you are today?
Whew. Tanya starting big, y'all. These stories are so powerful. I want to talk about in the beginning, as you said, my story started like so many others, and I would never know that unless I've spoken out exactly what I'm about to say here. So I had a hard childhood because I grew up as the only Filipina American in my class. And I remember looking around and thinking, why does no one else look like me? And to get really, really deep, at the beginning of this podcast, I remember, you know, having a crush on the only other brown boy in my school. Like, I have a chance with him. And then him just telling me that I was not desirable enough. And I remember thinking at that moment, looking through my yearbook, looking specifically at this one girl named Marusha. She was this beautiful brown-haired, peppy cheerleader, and thinking, God, like, I just wish I was white like her. I wish I was popular like her. And if I couldn't be white enough, I was questioning why I couldn't be Asian enough. So then I even remember this, and I don't think I've ever spoken this aloud, Tanya, but I would like go in the mirror and like pull my rounded eyes to the sides and try to look like one of my beautiful Japanese classmates and think, God, like, why can't I be more Asian and beautiful? And so my story really starts with me being different and wishing that I could be the same as everyone else. Flash forward to my career. So now in my 20s, I am working in advertising agencies in OC with these household names and these brands. And I'm the youngest woman and the only brown person in the room. with these men who are twice my age in suits and mostly white, thinking, I have no voice, I have no say in this room. Well, an interesting thing happened at this time, Tanya, because social media started to explode. And I was a creative copywriter and account manager in one. And we started to notice that, hey, the brown and black buying power was more powerful than anyone ever expected. And so for the first time in my life, I'm realizing, oh my gosh, I have a say. I can intimately connect to these people who once never had a say, but now have the spending power to do so. And so from there, my career just took off. I was constantly winning more creative campaigns from agencies much larger than us because I called myself a boots on the ground girl. Like I could really connect with the audience and what they're going through and what they desired. And so this is how I really started to have an empathetic heart for storytelling and marketing. And then flash forward, I ended up leaving the creative world because I got tired of making millions for billionaires and selling things that I didn't believe in, from cars to printers to bread, even though I did love my bread client. Shout out to you. But I didn't find purpose in it. And I was living 70 miles away from my family and I never saw them, working 12 to 14-hour days, constantly trying to beat myself in my own creative. It was just exhausting. And so, like many entrepreneurs out there who have left their jobs in order to seek more family and financial freedom, I ended up going on this 6-month missions trip. And what I needed was to get away from the churning of always working, but then also to understand like my own soul and to listen to my own heart and wonder, what is my purpose on this earth? I don't believe that I'm just here to make money and die. And so as I traveled the world, meeting people in these different places, I saw this constant outcry for people to be more than what society had handed to them. I saw these young men in Bangalore, India, who were told that they're supposed to have this 9-to-5 corporate job, but the only time I saw them come alive is when they were playing guitar that they learned from watching a guitarist on YouTube. I saw young girls lamenting and trying to leave their families in order to move to the States in order to have any sense of individuality. And I think to wrap this up, the big story that really sticks on my heart that drives me in my work today, and Come Alive Co., our mission is to help each and every one of us come alive in our unique gifts and audacious vision. That story is that one day when I was able to get away from work and spend time with my nieces who I missed them growing up, I was coloring on the floor of my parents' house, coloring this picture of Cinderella with my 4-year-old gorgeous Portuguese and Filipina niece. And she was looking throughout the colored pencils to pick the blue for her dress, Cinderella's dress, and the yellow for Cinderella's hair, I said, Ren, why don't you pick the brown for her eyes and the black for her hair, just like you? And Tanya, in that moment, my perfect, intelligible 4-year-old, beautiful niece doesn't skip a beat. She doesn't pause. She simply says, princesses don't look like me. Mm-hmm. And that story continues to break my heart because it's the story that I've lived my whole life of you cannot be what you cannot see. So I made it my mission to help everyone, especially women and people of color, realize and come alive in our unique gifts and audacious vision, because you don't know who's watching and you don't know how you being activated into the world will help others activate into their place in the world as well and make this world a better place, which we need.
We can just stop the podcast right here. That was just gold. That was just gold. I so feel and hear you in your story. I have very similar experiences growing up as an Indian American here in Orange County, and love so much that you're doing this. And that is why, like, the concept of competition doesn't exist. Like, you need to be doing this. I need to be doing this. We need to be doing this work and helping other people share their stories, because you're right. You have no idea who's listening, getting inspired, and shifting their way out of that space of how things have always been done, how things have always been seen, and into a new way where they are the princess and anybody can be a princess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love that. And so is that really why you niche down into specializing in brand story versus other marketing, techniques like, all the stuff, Google Analytics? Is that why you really niched into brand story?
Oh, that's a great question, Tanya. And it's so timely because yesterday, even I was crying to my husband because you and I have been in this industry long enough where we see technology change, and it's it's changing faster now than we ever have experienced. I just saw a stat that TikTok is now the #1 website that's visited over Google for the first time in 15 years. And so we're seeing technology and marketing rapidly changing from where, content is king and everyone make blogs so that your SEO optimization is, you're like ranking on Google. And now it's make sure that you're making 15-second reels and hey, show a dance move or two so that you go viral. Marketing is always changing. And to be honest, I feel like, am I aging out of my own industry? And as I was crying to my husband about how we're losing this true human connection that helps us get to know one another in the breadth that, for instance, this podcast is doing. So thank you for this, Tanya. My husband said, it doesn't matter how fast this world goes or changes, story will always connect us to one another. And I truly believe, Tanya, like I have said, that if there's anything in the world that I will stake my life on, it's connection. It's human connection. Connection and creativity are what is going to save us in the end as we become more depersonalized in media and technology. And so I believe, Tanya, that there is nothing more human than bearing witness to one another's stories, providing a space where we can share in empathy and share our experiences, because that is how we see one another. And so, yes, it is a marketing strategy because storytelling is 22 times more memorable than any other device. It's how our brains are wired. But humanistically, it's how we pass the divide of me versus you, Black versus white, and say, I see you. You're human just like me.
Yes, dropping the stats, 22 times more effective. I'm gonna use that.
Do it. Psychologist Jerome Bruner found that.
Okay. Amazing. And I believe it. I feel so affirmed and seen by everything you said, which is why you and I are co-conspirators. Because, often I'm with other marketers and the conversation is, like you said, about KPIs and cost per lead and all of these things. And I'm just like, well, what happened to you? Tell me your story. What happened to you? What did you grow through? And so you're right. I agree with you so much. It's that human element that we all crave that builds trust in a way that really nothing else can, right?
Completely.
Stories, yeah. They're generative. And so speaking of stories, while all stories are powerful, leaning on this campfire circle metaphor, sometimes they're scary stories too. Sometimes they're scary stories. And some of them can actually cripple us or stop us, but then some are helpful and transformative. And so either way you want to answer this question, what messages did you get growing up as a Filipina woman about standing out, about having a big voice, about showing up and getting visible?
Oh, these questions, Anya, you just like strike to the gut. This is why this podcast is #1. Subscribe, like it, all the things.
Love you.
Share it with your friends. This is such a great question. And again, so timely. I was on a call today with Bozoma St. John. She is the CMO at Netflix. She's like my patron saint because she's an African woman who's here in the States making a big difference where she is simply by showing up herself. And she shared these stories of how she was told to be less. She was told to not wear bold lipstick, to not wear bold colors. And she was like, are you kidding me? I'm fly. I'm not going to, dampen this down for anyone. And that's the story that I wish I had heard growing up, honestly, because the stories that I was told growing up as a Filipina American, and again, these were not overt. It was no one telling me, be less than who you are. It was just the fear of your parents came here from another country, trying to learn a new language and make enough money to provide a way forward for you and your sister. So in order to survive, you better fit in so you don't stand out and cause trouble. And so I think of, is it Representative John Lewis who says, cause good trouble? When we are told that we cannot use our voice or our very own being to stand for what we believe in, then we just become a cog in the machine. And I believe that's why I was falling into this depression, is because I wasn't living out my gifts or my vision for the world of creating a more exciting and equitable world for everyone. And so those stories that I received, Tanya, of just fitting in so that I don't cause trouble or that I can just merely survive in life, those are the stories I was told. But again, my company is called Come Alive Co. because I don't believe we're here to just merely survive, but to come alive and create a life and work worth living and talking about.
Wow. I love that. And what's coming up for me in this moment, and even bringing it back to what you were sharing earlier about how you went on, your long trip and you saw individuals start to come alive when they pulled out their guitar, right? It's like, so I recently had my friend Raj on this podcast, and he's a brand photographer who lives in New York City. He happens to be Bengali, like myself. And I remember asking him, like, what his parents thought of him becoming a creative versus a doctor or an engineer or an attorney, or all these things that we pick up on, feeling like we need to do to fit in, to be successful, to make our parents' sacrifice pay off, right? And he reminded me, this is such a good answer. He reminded me of like the deep cultural lineage of creativity and art that actually exists in our culture, which I kind of forgot. Like, I mean, there was a picture of Rabindranath Tagore, who's a Bengali author who won the Nobel Prize for Literature, that was hanging on our wall. And I forgot, it was all there, but I just chose to feed into a different cultural story for so long of who I needed to be. But not anymore. Not anymore. We can always rewrite the story, We can always rewrite the story.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful, Tanya. And I love that you said it was hanging on your wall, like right behind you, probably staring at you as you're doing these Zoom calls. And all you had to do was turn around and pay attention in that moment to your own lineage, to your own DNA. That's a story that I've been unraveling in my own life, as last year I got to attend this amazing event in the Bay called Pinayista. So shout out to Dina Mariko, Make It Mariko events, and our shared friends too, Praise and Allison. In this time, it was an event solely dedicated to Filipino women, creatives, entrepreneurs. And I have never been in such a space, a safe space, where I could explore what it meant to be an entrepreneur and a creative in the context of being Filipina. And I remember one of the speakers saying, "We are the women of the volcanoes and the rice paddies. We have survived through 2 or 3 colonialist takeovers. There is nothing that we cannot go through and grow through." And I think when we forget where we came from, we also forget the power and the fact that our ancestors worked so hard for us to get to where we are today. And so I almost think it's not just sad, it's like taking advantage of the fact that we were put here on this earth for a very reason, through the sacrifices of our lineage, to do something more beautiful and meaningful and free than they ever got to.
Yes. And tapping into that resource. As we share these stories, there's a lot of charge, right? There's a lot of charge, emotional labor, right? And as you and I nurture and co-write and pull out brand stories, both for ourselves and for other people, which is what we do on a day-to-day basis, there's a lot of charge that we have to hold, both for the client and for us. It's laborious, right? There's contractions that show up as imposter thoughts, as sitting with these feelings of, will anybody listen? Will anybody care? But once that story is birthed into the world, it's like so joyous. So I guess I have a question around how do you hold that process for your clients, specifically the emotional piece of it?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful story, or beautiful comment from someone who knows what it's like to, again, bear witness to stories. So thank you also, Tanya, for the beautiful life-changing work that you do for your clients. It truly is so much work emotionally, not just in the head, but in the heart, to hold this space for our clients. And actually, a quote that I really love that I just looked up today again is, "There is no greater agony than a story untold inside of you," from Maya Angelou, the amazing poet. And so the emotional labor of holding space for someone else's story is kind of like you're a story doula, right? Like you're there, like you said, you kind of said contraction. And I just immediately thought of the birthing process, because as women, we are called to birth, and not necessarily physical children, but sometimes we're birthing ideas. And for story bearers, we are birthing someone's story into the world. So I want to say that the greatest labor, that's not the right word, but the greatest thing that we are called to in these moments is listening. And I think that alone there, Tanya, is a powerful word for everyone, because there's a stat that we hear 4,000 to 10,000 messages a day, whether that be ads or simply our own negative messaging rewiring in our brain telling us how to act. We hear all these messages a day. And so we are told to bring our voice into the world and to speak and to carve our path and to be the loudest in the room. But where does that leave any space for listening, for hearing, and for empathy to connect people who are different? So I've been in a season recently where, even as a speaker, I've been called to listen to people because I believe that listening is the space and the gold that helps pull out the gold from others. And so I would say that, among many other things, the tools to listen to someone's story and to phrase it in order in terms of like the storytelling formula that is taught by so many before us of how to tell a great story. I think the greatest labor or the greatest job that I do as your story doula or your story unpacker is simply to listen to you and to listen deeper. I think that we tend to hear each other, but we're not truly listening. So some things that I listen for is when you can tell that someone's emotional about a certain part of their life. For instance, in our story, Tanya, we could say, oh, it sounds like you grew up othered. What did that mean to you? But why? Where does the pain come from? And where does the purpose come from? Because that is where the gold comes from, is when you understand the pain and the purpose in someone's life, when you can get deeper than I work 9 to 5, I hated my job, so I pieced out and started this business. That's where the gold lies. It lies beneath. And that can only come out from listening and encouraging them to tell it and to tell them that there is someone out there who needs that story. Because like our story shared just now, Tanya, there is someone who we can only reach only if we share the depth of our story.
Love that. Love that. You're exactly right. And what came up for me as you even shared that is almost like this transition. Like, we live in such an individualistic culture. We live in a culture that was created from, I mean, it's honestly from settler colonialism. And so individualism, being the loudest in the room, being the one person on the stage, like that form of leadership has been the form for so many years. But I think through this work, we get to reimagine a different way. And I think listening and holding and nurturing and being in community, right, is the key. And so you are a model and mentor for that. Including the ways that you build community, like you literally build community with people. So Dana Snyder connected us like many months ago. And we had a wow date, which is your version of like a coffee chat. And before I could get on your Calendly, there were 2 questions that you had me fill out. And so the first one was like, what can I do to support you? Meaning, what can Ché do to support Tanya? And then the second one was, in your biggest dreams, like no holds back, like what is your biggest vision? I will speak into that dream and why I know you are the correct person to see that through. And I was like, what? That's amazing. And it's amazing for multiple reasons, because it's all about, these questions are all about me, right? Not you, not Ché. You live in the space of always taking care of your people first, right? And so tell me a little bit about how those questions came up and how do these wow dates help you build community?
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. So the Wow Date was inspired by Liz Forkin Bohannon, who I found through Yellow Co., which is another space that I found, Tanya. And Liz says to her team, we always think about the how as entrepreneurs, like how are we going to achieve this dream? But first, we really need to start with a wow. Let's first wow one another with our ideas, and then we can figure out the how later, right? But if you start with a how, you're going to snip the wow in the bud. And so as entrepreneurs, we're dreamers, and we have to get out there and think of the biggest dreams to change the world for good. And so I named them wow dates because I wanted us to just wow each other with our ideas and to keep gassing each other up in these ideas because of this. I am a person of faith, and one of the scriptures says that in the tongue is the power of life and death. And I don't know the stat today, but we are so constantly wired for negativity, mostly because of survival instincts and safety. You know, instead of telling us to go touch the fire, there are times when our barrier thinking is good for our survival. But we are now in a time where we get to thrive with the power of positivity and gassing each other up. And so I think it's really important to hear each other out, again, to be listening and to call out the gold that we see in one another, which I believe is my main mission on earth, because there are so many things as entrepreneurs and as dreamers that get in the way of us bringing a dream to life. And yet at the same time, there are hundreds, if not thousands of people who are waiting for you to come alive in these dreams and this calling over your life that if you don't step forward in it, how are those people going to be served? So I almost could say selfishly, but selfishly for all those people, but also personally, building community is so important in terms of it's not about me. like you said, Tanya, it's not about me, it's about us. Because again, pointing it back to scripture, there is a story that says each of us are a different body part. So imagine, Tanya, even though you and I do similar things as brand strategists and storytellers, you could be an eye and I could be a toe, and the body would suffer without either of those things. And so why would I want my body surviving without an eye to see clearly through? And so as community, when we can see something in one another that we ourselves cannot see, when we can mirror to each other the goodness in one another, we can activate each other into our roles. Because I believe that the world that's so messed up right now is because so many of us are not coming alive in the places we're supposed to be. And so if we can each encourage one another to truly take our place and move forward in power and activate our people the way that we are supposed to, we are all going to be better off for it. So it's selfish.
No, it's not selfish. It's leading into interdependence, which is so big actually, because that in and of itself takes a lot of active unlearning, whether we realize it or not, because we've just been conditioned into being competitive with each other, because patriarchy and all of the related fuckery that goes on. I almost asked if it was okay for me to curse. And then I was like, oh, it's my podcast. Okay.
Yeah, girl, it's your podcast. You own this.
Yes. But all of that, it programs competition and power hoarding into women, because we're having to fight for opportunities more readily available to men. And these are remnants from, toxic work cultures. But even as we become entrepreneurs, we sometimes carry these stories without us realizing it and jump right into the same hamster wheel. And so just by you even saying that, just by us being business baes together, even though we do such similar things, like it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And so I want to ask you, do you feel like there's anything that you had to maybe shed or rewire to be so deeply in community in this way, especially with people who often provide the exact same services you do?
Totally. And it's so interesting because I don't know if I consciously ever had to put that person first. And maybe I did. But again, in my upbringing, in my culture, both as a collectivistic culture in Filipino world, it sounds like a Mario term, super Filipino world, but that, and I grew up, my family is basically my family's church. Like, they're not my blood relatives, but they're aunties and uncles who took care of me growing up. They watched me, they fed me, we grew up singing together. I found so much joy and unity in leaning on one another in this Filipino community. And so I think I just grew up, Tanya, being shown what happens when we all live interdependently, when we all can provide for one another. It's not just me and my family versus yours. It's how can we provide more joy and belonging in a community? And so I think being able to model this out has been so powerful for me. And I do want to share the story of the first time this really benefited someone else and also me, to show the power of sharing. So I was hired on to do this amazing job for a company, and it was my wedding year. So I'm like, sweet, I'm going to make all this money, pay for my stupid expensive wedding in California. I'm sure many listening can attest to that. And then they approached me and they said, hey, this is a lot of work. We might hire on a second copywriter. And so to me, the capitalistic tendency pops up, and I'm thinking, oh no, like, what if this person is better than me? She's going to take the work from me. And so even then, Tanya, I guess it is the unlearning and the shifting my thinking, right? We have to rewire our thoughts, neuroplasticity, and say, wait, this is a good thing. I don't have to work as hard. I'm still getting paid a lot. Like, heck yeah. And so we brought in the other copywriter, and I will never forget this, but I remember having a choice of either letting her stay behind and I'm like, figure it out yourself. Or what I did do was I brought her up and I trained her in everything I knew. I didn't make my boss teach her, but I did that with her and for her. We became fast friends. And one of the most powerful things she said to me was, wow, Ché, like, I can tell that you are a woman who like truly believes in what you believe in your faith and that power of sharing. And I'm like, it's one thing to say it, but then to model it is another. And then going even further, we had the opportunity to do email copywriting. And I'm like, nah, that's not my wheelhouse. I'm going to hire on another copywriter. So I'm now just like, share all the wealth. I brought on another friend, and she was so grateful because it was such a great paycheck. And this was her realm of expertise, was email. She killed it. Years later, Tanya, there was a speaking tour. And I didn't know it at the time, but I truly love speaking. It's a way to connect to people. And that copywriter couldn't make it, but she recommended me. And so it's because of that trading of I believe in you, you believe in me, that I was able to fill her spot. And I was able to come alive in my gifts and vision. So there's so much power when we lift each other up. And you never know when your opportunity is just waiting for you because you did it for others.
That's it. That's it. That's it. That's it. We are all so powerful. And by shifting from trying to hoard that power and control everything, by shifting from that, you get to really experience the magic of sharing that power. And everything you said, I co-sign, and similar things have happened to me. And one of the other really cool things I think too about operating in this way is that it just continues to just validate this work. Because sometimes I'll talk to somebody and mention, that I do brand story, and they're like not really sure what that is, but then when I talk to you, I get re-engaged, I get reinvigorated, I get re-excited, and I continue to learn. And so we just get continuously and exponentially better at our craft by being in community together. There's so many facets of why this collaborative approach is better,
Oh, completely. And thank you for that. And I echo the sentiment, Tanya. You are so powerful and rooted in the work that you do. And just for everyone listening, Tanya and I basically do the same thing. She's bringing me onto her podcast to speak in the way that I introduced her to my community. And when I shared that with someone else, they're like, oh, you're not scared because she does what you do. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. There are 8 billion people in the world. I cannot serve all of them. And there are people who will resonate with Tanya way better than they could resonate with me. And so exactly what you said, Tanya, how can we hone our craft if we're living in a silo? We get to learn from one another just the way that, groups in Africa, groups in the Philippines, groups in India had to teach themselves before there was Google. So this is only a good thing to share and lift each other up.
Hey, if anything you're hearing today inspires you to get more visible as a go-to trusted voice for your audience and drive change towards your deeper mission, I've got something for you. LinkedIn is my favorite place to share my stories and build relationships with my co-conspirators and brand new friends. So I put together a free resource with 14 prompts to create your next post on LinkedIn. Take all the guesswork out of what to say and just start building your impact and influence. Be sure to tag me in your post so I can come by, cheer you on, and amplify your message. You can find those free prompts in the show notes. Okay, back to the episode. Something that's coming up for me at this moment is there may be people listening who are experiencing, maybe, this is just a guess, right? But maybe experiencing a little bit of a shame response around being rooted in this competition mentality. And what I want to say to that is this is complicated because it's not innate. We weren't born with that. We were conditioned into that. It's something we've learned. Yeah. And as leaders who maybe have come from traditionally marginalized or silenced positions, we have so much passion, so much experience, so much insight, just waiting to come out and explode. And sometimes that can come out messily as trying to be the one, the only, the best, the brightest, but at the expense of others who are equally shiny and talented. But when we get to shine together, it's like a supernova of light. It's like so bright. And that's what's going to change it. But yeah, when we have a shared vision, why not add people to our community? Because that's going to help make that vision actually happen. It takes all of us, right?
Completely. And thank you for bringing that up because like you said, there could be a shame response and it's not your fault, listener, that you have these defense mechanisms, right? Like in Filipino culture, especially, I know we talk about the crab mentality and possibly in other Asian cultures, most likely, where when you put a bunch of crabs in a bucket, they'll try to crawl out. And even when they get near the top, another crab will pull it down as if no one wants to see anyone win. When really, couldn't they just stack on top of each other and help each other crawl out? I think about this a lot. And so if you're listening to this and thinking, well, it's hard for me to promote others. First of all, no, that's a response to the environment that you have been put in. Tanya talks a lot about what happens because of capitalism, and I applaud you. And so thank you for creating the safe space to talk about that, Tanya. And so secondly, I do want to encourage you, listener, to create a safe space around you. If you're not in a place where you feel like you can uplift the world, what about the people around you who do have your back, who are the relationships that you know will speak into your life and that you can speak into theirs? It doesn't have to be in your own industry. This is something that I really learned in therapy is when you are expanding, you will be attacked by other people who maybe don't want to see you win. That's just what happens in leadership. But as long as you have this safe circle around you of people who really know you and see you, these are the people who can feed your spirit so that you can continue to grow and to go forward.
Your campfire circle, your people, your flock.
Yes, Tanya.
Yes, that's
campfire
it.
circle.
Yeah. You're so cute. I love you.
So much joy here. This is our joy explosion.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. I could talk to you forever, but as we start to wrap up, I want to ask you a little bit about vision, because I know how important vision is in this process of brand story, of getting your voice out there. I know we both work with vision-led women. You know, we are vision-led women. And so I want to ask you, what is your big, dreamy, imaginative, new vision for the future that you're working on creating? Like, what will the world look like? What is your legacy? What will you put on this earth to do in terms of creating a new world?
Oh, this is such a great question. It's like our wow date, Tanya.
Yeah,
I feel like goosies down my arms of thinking about this. Oh, the vision of the world that I want to create. You know, originally I thought it was to have more Black and brown and marginalized voices and women amplified on platforms everywhere. I want more stories of the folks that we normally don't see in major media to be shown so that more people like my niece can look up to other women that look like her and say, that's possible because I see it before me. And so I once would have answered that celebrating our differences in being unique people and promoting that through major media for the world to see is my major vision. Interestingly, I had a conversation with a friend and we were talking about plus size representation in lingerie ads. And there was one ad that did it really well with so many different plus size women. And I apologize if there's a better term for that now that I am not aware of yet. But I was like, wow, this ad is really powerful. They're using models who don't normally look like what like the typical model looks like. And she's like, you know, I really hope that one day we get to the point where we're not commenting on, oh, wow, there's a woman who's a different body shape. There's a different gender. There's a different identity. There's a different color. And I'm not used to seeing that. Can't we just be excellent because we are human beings and we are all excellent? And I was like, whoa. So right now, I think we're working toward the world where there's more representation for more women, more people of color, more marginalized voices. But again, I would love to come to the place where it's like, yeah, Tanya is going to be in the room because she's the best, not because we need a brown voice, but because she is simply the best. I want a more exciting and equitable world for all to belong and each person to come alive, knowing that what they have to offer the world is so powerful and purposeful that they cannot wake up one more day without doing that. And I want them to be celebrated for that. I don't want a world that just tolerates one another. I want a world that's so empathetic and excited that we're celebrating one another. And that's the world that I want to see.
Now, and it's my turn to have goosies. That was amazing. That was amazing. Thanks. I want that world too. I want that world too. And that's why we get to conspire because it's our, because we get to work together towards that vision. It takes all of us to make that happen.
Yeah, so we get to dream and conspire by the campfire circle.
Yes, yes. Yay.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for hearing me out and for creating a space where we get to create a world like this. Thank you for this podcast. It's so meaningful and important.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure. It's my honor. And it could only work because I get to have incredible people like you join me. So tell the good people listening, how can they get in touch with you? How can they work with you? How can they find you? Yeah. Where are you at?
Good people listening, find me at comealive.co on Instagram, comealive.co. That's also our website, keeping it easy. And how to work with me, you can go on our website, comealive.co, and look at our services. Something that I'm really proud of is that we've created the first brand story framework for women and empathetic leaders by a woman, where instead of me being your copywriter writing for you, my goal is to help you hone your unique voice and own your powerful story. Because Your website's not going to speak for you when you have the opportunity to speak and influence and be the leader that you are. Instead, I want to help you raise your voice and share your story so that you win the opportunities that come across your desk. And so I teach brand story. I guide you to come alive in your own story through this framework that helps you speak out your message and live it powerfully. So hit me up. Let's be friends.
That's beautiful. And you have a beautiful website. I wish that I had crashed your photo shoot of all of the women in their like jewel tone rompers hanging on the beach. I'm like, man, I should have crashed that.
Oh, you are more than welcome. Anyone listening is more than welcome to future photo shoots. We're going to do it. We're going to have a campfire circle podcast live. It'll be great. It's a party, y'all. That's my vision for the world. It's just constant party. I like that.
Yes. I'm in. Oh, I just love you. Thank you for this conversation. What a gift. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Tanya. It's a gift spending time with you and your listeners as well.
I'll see you next time.
See you next time.
What'd you think? Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, or even better, reach out and let me know through lumosmarketing.co. Yes, that's Lumos, as in the illumination spell from Harry Potter. Because when you shine, magical things happen. You can get social with me on LinkedIn, and of course, check out the show notes to stay in touch with our guests. Let's talk soon.